Once upon a time, there was a kingdom like no other. A kingdom ruled by its own subjects, with no kings or queens, where the subjects were ably guided by the great warriors of the land, who protect them from every threat and enlighten them with precious knowledge that would help them become rulers of their own land. It was a kingdom that did not need a ruler. When the people of this kingdom wish to play, they make their own toys. When they wish to eat, they run their own kitchen and decide on their own menu. When they desire entertainment, they sing their own songs, celebrate their own art forms, and enact their own plays. How harmonious a kingdom would be if all the subjects worked together in unity to build it. Here is a kingdom where there is knowledge not only in its books but everywhere in the air. Here is a kingdom where responsibility is learned and shared. Here is a kingdom like no other.
Hello everybody and welcome back to day 2 of Tapas Project Shaala. I'm Preeti Vikram, founder of Tapas, and I'm excited to introduce to you one of our Tapas learners, Karun. Karun, please unmute yourself.
Good evening everyone. My name is Karun and I'm a student of Tapas. Today I will be talking about our guest, Miss Rachel Tomlinson. Miss Rachel Tomlinson is the head teacher of Barrowford Primary School in Lancashire, northwest of England. Rachel has been a teacher for 26 years and a head teacher for 15 of those. Rachel has a BSc Honours in Cell Biology from Durham University. She has qualified teacher status and a national professional qualification for headship. She considers herself fortunate to be part of a global community of phenomenal educators who she learns so much from.
I think it's time to then have Rachel join us. Thank you, Karan, for the lovely introduction.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Hey Rachel, a warm welcome to Tapas Project Shaala.
I've been practicing namaskara. I love Karen. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction, and how beautifully he did it. So well done, Karen.
I'm just going to pop off and get your slides on. So over to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Preeti, for inviting me to chat to you all about how we embed cultural capital into our curriculum in the northwest of England, as Karen said. It's a real pleasure to be here. I want to start because, first of all, I unapologetically lead with love, and our school is full of love. And I wanted to share some of M. Scott Peck's thoughts with you all. He says that love is defined as the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely it's an intention and an action. Will implies choice. We do not have to love, we can choose to love. And at Barrowford, we do choose to love. We love our children, our staff, our families, our community, and our planet. One of my friends, Rachel Higginson, talks about consciously curating a culture of belonging, not othering. And I love that phrase. I'm going to steal that unashamedly, because that's what we do at Barrowford. One of the most important books I've ever read is a book called Thrive, as you can see on the screen, by Valerie Hannon. And Valerie Hannon talks about 4 levels of thriving. I'm not going to go through them all in detail, but I will share some of them. So Valerie talks about an intrapersonal level of thriving, about having a secure sense of self and taking responsibility for your personal health, fitness and well-being, thinking about sources of personal nourishment and renewal in that. She also talks about interpersonal thriving, so loving and respectful relationships in diverse technologized societies, which this is a great example of, isn't it? And engaging with and learning from other generations. She talks about societal thriving, where we have to now navigate a disrupted and uncertain landscape of work. And she talks about reinventing a participative, authentic and meaningful democracy in a planet where the global top 1% own 46% of all wealth. So it's really important that we can thrive as a society. And then she talks about planetary and global thriving, so living sustainably, protecting the Earth's ecosystem and acquiring global competence. And she asks a really interesting question. She talks about outcomes and school outcomes in the education of the outcomes of education generally. And she says, what if we considered these as outcomes, as the most important outcomes? What if we considered global competence as an important outcome? The collective contribution to local sustainability, academic achievement evidenced by testing, but also by application. Work-based learning as an outcome, entrepreneurship and real-world products as an outcome, engagement in community programs and campaigns and civic involvement, learning relationships with the older generations, positive caring relationships as the norm. What if that was an outcome, a positive outcome of the education system? What if good mental health was a positive outcome? What about strong learner agency, initiation and leadership of learning? And what about physical fitness habits? And they're all really interesting questions and ones that we kind of grapple with quite often in our curriculum. I'm going to talk about storytelling. In his book, Why Students Don't Like School, Daniel Willingham has a subsection called The Power of Stories. And he quotes in there, a quote from there is, the human mind seems exquisitely tuned to understand and remember stories, so much so that psychologists sometimes refer to stories as psychologically privileged, meaning that they're treated differently in memory than other types of material. Storytelling has become more and more important and central to our curriculum at Barrowford, in combination with the massive power of cultural capital and intergenerational learning. It's hard to have one without the others. When we look at the story and the people, it's about a mirrored curriculum between the two, mirrored curriculum framework. It has to be useful to all of the people and allow us all to grow under what my friend Sue calls a roof of reciprocity. We work on a model of experiences, opportunities and invitation. So I'm going to share some of the ways in which we use story and intergenerational learning to enhance the experience of our children. There's a lot to say. I've got to talk more slowly, but strap in because there's a lot. For me, equity is really important, and I just want to kind of concentrate on equity for a little bit. And often there's an issue between equity, equality and justice in the school system. I'm sure lots of you have seen this image. I used to argue with my husband, and now he's given in and agrees with me, that treating everybody equally doesn't mean treating them the same. Sometimes treating people equally adds to the unfairness and inequity of the situation. So we need to think about how we spread our resources more fairly. But in reality, what we know, particularly in the UK, but I'm assuming I'm talking from a UK perspective, but around the world, what actually happens is this. So I want to develop a curriculum which allows us to get to to this point, whereas schools, for educators, we acknowledge that there's a need for not only equity of access and experience, but also for the removal of any barriers at all, so access is given to all. And cultural capital, knowing who you are in the world and knowing what the world looks like, is a really important part of this. And then, so we need to create a context in which this can and does happen. And this is what I believe can add to the sense of well-being in the system. So essentially, the way I think, the way our school thinks education can create a better world for us all, is to create a community and design a curriculum that promotes good humaning, where our children have the opportunity to be good human beings, doing good human doings. That's that act of love is an act there as well, isn't it? We can choose to act. And a school community and curriculum that our children are able to access without barriers, one in which they have agency and their voice is heard, and one in which they see everyone represented. Ultimately, where every individual is fully engaged, where innovation and exploration thrives, and where views, beliefs, and values are integrated. And we're going from equity to belonging to mattering. We all want to matter. The golden thread running through our curriculum is our equality, diversity, and inclusion agenda, making sure our curriculum is representative, that it promotes allyship, and it's accessible to all of our children and all of our families. So we are a project-based learning school. This is our logo. You'll see it on all of my slides, but it's just 4 things. So these are the 4 pillars of our curriculum. And the first one is the national curriculum in England. That's the law that we have to use the national curriculum, and it underpins our offer. But we do so much more than the national curriculum. We think about who our children are today, where they've come from, and the context they need to kind of enable us to prepare for tomorrow's hurdles and tomorrow's successes. So project-based learning is the key for us here. So within this, our second pillar, alongside the national curriculum, is something we call Rounded and Grounded, which I will talk about, and then the Sustainable Development Goals and the Convention of the Rights of the Child. So we wanted our projects to be able to demonstrate the deeper learning our children experience, as well as the learning that allows them to pass the test, because that's important too. So Rounded and Grounded is our bespoke to our school. It's about dispositions and characteristics and values that we want to inculcate in our children. So we teach these implicitly and explicitly. I won't go through all of them, but they're there. They're on our school website, which I'm sure you can look at. But they're centered around having relationships, which is about understanding the impact of social interaction on our learning behaviours, around having insight, which is understanding the impact of reflection on learning behaviours, being robust, which is about the impact of attitudes on learning behaviours, and being practical. So that's the impact of process on our learning behaviours. And we teach these through our projects implicitly as well as explicitly. Obviously, the Global Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm sure many of you know, and then the rights of the child, the Convention for the Rights of the Child. So all 4 of those pillars, we use our teachers' craft projects through. We use something called Mantle of the Expert, which was developed back in the 70s by someone called Dorothy Heathcote. And it works by the teacher planning a fictional context where students take on the responsibility of the expert, and they become an expert team. And as the team, they're commissioned by a client to work on an assignment which has been planned to generate tasks and activities that involve them in studying and developing different areas of the curriculum. So they're quite expertly crafted by our teachers. It doesn't mean that the students are magically endowed with any expertise, but it allows them in the real world where they are still children, it allows them to work as if they are experts. It allows them to take on the powers and the responsibilities of a team of experts, working on important assignments, caring about the things they do, and taking great pride in their status as the expert. And it allows them to have, meet challenging situations in a really safe way inside the classroom. And children can have a lot of discovery learning within these mantles. I'm just going to share one which made me smile when I thought about it. This is a real project, but it made me smile when I was thinking about a project to share, because this felt really appropriate in the circumstances of where I'm talking to you at. So vultures. One of our members of staff happens to be South Asian heritage, and he'd been talking to his granddad one evening, and his granddad said, "I'm really worried about the vultures. I'm not seeing many." So he came back to school and said, "I want to do a project about the vultures. I want to find out what's happening." So our year 3, he was a year 3 teacher, so our year 3s are 7 and 8 years old. And their question became, why are the vultures dying and why should we care anyway? And so many of you will know this, but Indian vultures have been on the critically endangered list since 2002. And there are all kinds of reasons now that have been now discovered that they're on the critically endangered list. One of them, the main one really, is linked to an anti-inflammatory drug called diclofenac. And obviously there are all kinds of legal implications now around the use of diclofenac in cattle. But because the vultures died, because the cattle died and they'd been treated with diclofenac, the vultures, ate carrion. That's what they do, and it was discovered that diclofenac was fatal and poisonous to vultures. So the decline in the vulture population drastically affected the environment around them. There was their job by removing carrion, their job in inverted commas by removing carrion, helped decrease pollution. It helped the spread of disease, helped control the spread of disease, and it suppressed lots of mammalian scavengers like rats and dogs. The decline of vultures meant that all those things increased. So human populations were impacted hugely. The waterways became infected. There was an explosion of rats and wild dogs. So there was all kinds of things that our children found out. I mean, I never knew that I would know so much about Indian vultures, and I know a fraction of what our 7 and 8 year olds found out. So what did our children do? Well, in the first instance, as in their role of experts, they wrote to the Indian government to recommend things that they could do. Remember, this is fictional. So they were the experts, and they recommended pathways and policies and different things. But I don't know how much you know about England or the northwest of England, but vultures aren't so much of a problem for us. So we were kind of like, well, great, they've had this experience, and that's fictional, but they've felt some power, and they've, they have used their agency in making recommendations. Those things don't necessarily impact on their everyday life. So we then looked at what does. Now, for us, hedgehogs are an issue. Decreasing populations of hedgehogs, decreasing populations of bees and insects and hedgerows and wildflowers and butterflies, all of those things are having a similar impact, to not quite as drastic, but to the decrease in the Indian vulture population. So they used what they'd found through the mantle about the vultures, and they talked to our parent population and our local community about how something seemingly so small could have a catastrophic impact on the environment. They talked about climate change. They talked about what they would do as experts, and they made recommendations to our local community about how we could support the population of bees and butterflies, for example. They talked about the intersectionality of ecosystems and used that phraseology. They talked about how important disruption to ecosystems was. And they massively used their voice with the parents and our local community about how to take care of our environment. I'm really sorry about this slide. It's loads of words really squished up, but if you can just look at it. So this is our national curriculum coverage. Year 1 to year 6 is the spread across an English primary school. And this is how we organised our curriculum, because we have a legal duty to cover the curriculum. But then how we design that and the impact that we can have in terms of our decision making about that creates lots of flexibility around our planning. So that's the way that our curriculum is designed. And then if we plant on that, our projects for this year, they're the projects that our children are taking part in this year. So our 3 terms, autumn, spring and summer, we're right in the middle of spring term at the moment. And you'll notice that all of our projects start with a question. It's about inquiry. It's about our children really embedding and immersing themselves in an inquiry. And I think one of my favourites this year was in year 5 last term. Can we go to Planet B? The whole national curriculum content there was about the solar system and space. So they used, so the year 5 teachers really carefully crafted a project around that. The children knew so much about the planets, because we were asking, we've made a bit of a mess of this one. Is there a planet B that we can go to? And of course, they found that there was no planet B. So the recommendations then became about, well, what do we need to do to look after this planet? Because we know that there isn't a planet B. And we talked about the kind of 4 ways that we could save planet B. We could be, I'm trying to remember all 4 now. We can be shouters, we can be learners, we can be, I can't remember because I'm talking. So there were 4, and they created a leaflet, a pamphlet that went out to parents to talk about how they could be activists quietly to save planet A in a really local way. So our projects are really specific in terms of the delivery to whole classes, and obviously follow a real structure. And they do change every year. We don't kind of have a cycle of projects. They change every year. We also, underpinning all of that, which is why I've used the iceberg as a metaphor, really, underpinning all of that, so the planned curriculum and then the curriculum outside of that is we have a cultural capital curriculum that's whole school, and has been carefully planned and curated to ensure that our children have a very balanced view of the world. And we have a calendar of events that we create to acknowledge celebrations to ensure our children and families are aware of the diversity of our community. So, for example, we celebrate Eid, we celebrate Ramadan, we have a community iftar, we celebrate Christmas, we acknowledge Holocaust Memorial Day, Easter, all of those festivals and different things. But then we also each week have a program of things we want to talk and think about. And again, I apologize for all the words on this slide, but you can see EDI is equality, diversity and inclusion. So all the things, the weeks and days, international weeks, national weeks and days that are marked. So they're all on the calendar. I love that the 10th of February is Umbrella Day, but there are all sorts of things on that calendar that we really mark. You can see in the 4th column along the rounded and grounded skill. For last week, it's our half term. This week we're on holiday, was to be confident. We looked at the Sustainable Development Goal, Zero Hunger, and then we looked at those rights of the child that you can see on there as well in blue last week. And through that, we kind of look at the world through a global lens. So we have on a weekly basis, we introduce different things. So we have a country of the week each week. We have a music genre of the week each week. So we kind of have this canon, if you like, of music genre, of artists, of poems that our children are exposed to, so that they can talk in any kind of context about lots of different things. Last week, our country happened to be Brazil, and our music genre was samba. We're currently developing a samba band at school, which we're really excited about. Our artist was Claude Monet. I couldn't really find a Brazilian artist at the time that was relevant. And then obviously it was Valentine's Day this week. So our poem of the week was William Shakespeare's Sonnet 116, which is about love. So it's really, really beautiful. And the children just explore those at different levels, depending on what age and stage they're at. The poem of the week, each week a class of our children present that poem, so they perform the poem in assembly for the rest of us. So all of the children learn it or read it, but one class in particular present it. We use something called Lifter, which is a commercially bought, it's a commercial book platform, and Lifter's story worlds are immersive learning environments where we explore real human stories through a visual 360 landscape and space and soundscape. It's a really high quality documentary films. So each of the story worlds features an inspiring human story. This was Marcello in Sao Paulo, which is why Brazil and samba are our country and music genre of the week. And the story worlds are really carefully curated, again, to spark curiosity, empathy and compassion. And they offer us a really intimate window into the lives and lessons of people around the globe. often it's based in somebody's home space, and then we venture out and discover different places that are important to the person in the film, learning about their culture, their work, their context along the way. And it's allowed us to do is meet a range of people, from a wildlife conservationist in the mountains of the Philippines to a fashion photographer in her studio in Nairobi, and loads of other people along the way. And our students hear those stories told in the person's first language. So we hear a variety of languages that are translated, obviously, for us. But it allows us to expose our children to people right across the globe. So, and then, excuse me, the other thing that we do each week is we have a picture book assembly. And so again, just from last week, as an example, I have the picture book, the actual picture books in my hand, and I read these to screen, and we play the video to the children in the classrooms. And then we just discuss any issues that arise from that. This week it was Mary and Frankenstein, because it was the International Day of Women in Science, and Mary Shelley obviously was fairly influential as a woman in science as well. So we talked about Mary and Frankenstein and ghost stories, and just really explored all of those things. But we explore a whole range of different things through that. So next week we're talking about disability. There's a story, you might know Michael Rosen, and Michael Rosen was fairly ill during COVID with COVID. So he's written a picture book about his experience, and that will be our book for next week. So you can see the spread. This is the spring term. This is a spread of things that we look at. So you can see the canon of music, the canon of poetry and artists. So our children can kind of hold their own in terms of what they know and who they know. And of course, we're looking at all those different countries as well. We also do quite a few in-person events. The photographs that you can see here of what we call our human libraries. And what we do here is we invite people from our local communities, very local or wider, to come and join us, and our children borrow them. So they borrow them for about half an hour, and it's about sharing story. And what I love about these events, and what these photos really clearly show, is that everybody starts sitting back in their seats, and 2 or 3 minutes into the event, we experience this lean in, and you can see that everybody leans in. So the space, we lean into the space, we lean into the story, we lean into the experience. And these are about conversations. So there's a whole thing about understanding the story of other people, but there's another thing about our children being able to hold conversations with lots and lots of different people from different contexts and different walks of life, who might be similar to them or very, very different. And there's a PhD, a researcher called Dr. Caroline Ferguson, and she talks about that personal storytelling and sharing from diverse perspectives is powerful, engaged pedagogy. It can nurture human connection, empathy, critical thinking, and historical consciousness. And that's what we find from these events. They're some of our favourite events. So we tend to use a human library, do a human library every term for our older children, for our year 5 and 6 children, and they can't wait to be involved. I think the adults sometimes are a bit worried about being borrowed, but actually by the end, the adults get as much from it as the children do. And I just want to finish with the story of the parable of the hummingbird. This is a YouTube clip. You can get it from YouTube if you search The Flight of the Hummingbird. And but briefly, the hummingbird lives in a forest, and the forest is on fire. So the forest animals are fleeing from the fire, apart from the hummingbird, who keeps flying back and forth. And the animals who are fleeing are watching the hummingbird and asking, "What are you doing?" The hummingbird is getting a droplet of water from a nearby lake and flying back to the forest and dropping the droplet of water. And he replies, "I'm doing what I can." So that's our philosophy. We do what we can, and each droplet, if all of us do our own droplets, eventually they'll create a lake, and we can create change. And And I think it's about the small steps, the small actions that add up to make a big impact that we can all make. So namaskara, thank you for listening. And I'll hand back over to Preeti. You're muted, Preeti. Preeti, you're muted.
I continue to speak, though you said. Thank you so much for that. In 30 minutes, I learned quite a lot. There's so much that I now want to go back to school and say, hey, let's do this and let's do so much more. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your generosity. I want to tell our viewers that Rachel has very graciously shared the entire cultural capital curriculum with us so that we are able to implement it in our school as well. So that's really generous of her, and we are looking at how we can implement that in our schools. Right at the beginning of your presentation, you spoke about the power of stories, right? And I was so intrigued by that because India has had a culture of oral traditions. So we pass down our traditions through talking about it through stories, and I find that so interesting. Now I realize why. It made sense that our traditions weren't captured really in the written word, but in the form of stories. I mean, we've lasted a 5,000 year uh, time period as a culture. So I'm assuming it's because we told great stories, so I
I
can
think
relate
so.
to what you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was lucky to spend a week, wasn't I, with you, Preeti, in Bangalore at a conference in November time. And what I've come away with is that power of story. And Preeti, I hope you are my same, was really influential in that. You told a lot of the story, and that was an incredible bit of my experience. And I think, that's how we learn about people, is how we become connected, isn't it? And that's how we come to celebrate each other. And that's what creates love, isn't it, I think?
Absolutely. So I think that's a great way. And I saw that stories were also an integral part of how you planned your curriculum. So a lot of the stories made up how children are learning. So it's not just the knowledge, but it's also how that story makes them feel. I think that's strong.
Yeah, and I think our children are really engaged in that. So I kind of mentioned that those projects aren't static. So next year they will look different. Last year they looked very different. And I think what's important is that we plan that around the children that we've got in the class, in each class, and what they're interested in at that current time, I think. And those things really change. You'll see there's a water, there's something in year 4 about water. And that became really important to us because a lot of our children are of Pakistani heritage. A lot of our children have family in Pakistan. And obviously last year there was a huge, devastating floods right across Pakistan that affected lots of our children's families. So one of our projects became not just about the water cycle or whatever, but it became about, actually, we need to think about, is too much water worse than not enough water, because and it allowed us to really explore what was happening for our children and their families and their heritage, and to think about what we could do about it from our little corner in the northwest of England, how we could impact potentially on families and communities in Pakistan at the other side of the world. So it's about engaging hearts as well as minds, isn't it?
Absolutely. And so that brings me to two questions I have about what you're doing, right? One is, where is the time in the day, right? How do you get all this done? I'll ask the second one after you answer this.
I think it's about creating space for what's important, isn't it? And I think because we don't, all of our projects encompass all of the subject areas. So we teach art through the project, we teach ICT through the project, we teach history and geography and science through the projects. So we're not having to kind of carve separate time out. It's about what we feel is really important. And our English curriculum can address some of the, we can use our texts. Some of the texts that we use can influence that. So we've carved out a huge chunk of the day because that's really, really important. Picture book and lifter. And we actually do a current affairs assembly at the same time each week. The 20 minutes, 15 minutes of the day. So it's not a huge amount. So kind of those bits aren't huge amounts of the day, but projects are really, really important. That's kind of the main spine of our curriculum, and we carve out the time, and it's about kind of pinning your values, isn't it? And saying, actually, this is what we believe is important. So this is what we're going to make space for.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. But there also one makes me question that does the parent community react to project-based learning? So, what is the response there?
Our parents love the fact that they can get really involved in the projects. We haven't yet reinstated them post COVID, and it's something that we're grappling with how to do best. But we have what we call exhibition evenings every term at the end of projects, where we share the learning, we share the outcomes with our parents, and invite members of the community in. So our parents love the fact that they can get involved in the projects, but they also love kind of the sense of activism. So our children go and advocate at home, and they'll say, no, let's not throw that away, let's do this. Or can we think about, if our parents are thinking about buying a new car, for example, the children have a real voice in that, say, well, let's have a think about the environment and what's better and what's worse. And so the children are really actively advocating about, looking after the planet and climate and those kinds of things. And I know lots of our parents will say, oh, they told me something, I didn't know that. So, they're talking all of the time and informing our parents about really interesting stuff. And, we know that children have to learn to read. We know children have to learn how to add and subtract and divide and all of those things. But actually, the projects are kind of really meaty and allow our children to have really interesting conversations at home. So that's what our parents really love. And of course, they can interact with us. And sometimes they will come into school as experts in their own right and kind of go, well, actually, that's what happened because...
That's great. So that kind of brings me to the next question. So, how do you do assessments? Is it as standardized as the rest of the world? How do you deal with that? Are children able to cope with standardized tests after having gone through PBL?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think English children are the most heavily tested in the world, actually. I think we were tested at 4 and at 5 and at 7 and at 10 and now at 8. So there's a lot of standardized testing. So it's about, for us as teachers, about kind of that balance of, being able to pass the test, which is important, but kind of not prioritizing that over the other really important stuff, which is learning to be people. And that good humaning is really important to us. And and I often will say, there's no, we talk about GCSEs, and a grade 9 at GCSE is the highest grade, and there's no point having a clutch of 9s in your hand at age 16 if there's no water or no oxygen to breathe. So actually, we need to think about the world that we're preparing our children to go into as well. And of course, we need to be able to pass a test. Of course, we need to be able to communicate. Of course, we need to be able to do all of those things. So we kind of use, so we do teach that stuff as well, because that stuff is important, but we use the project-based learning as vehicles really to teach that stuff through.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and gives hope to schools like us who've just started out on this journey and say that, yeah, we can do it too. So thank you for that. Later on towards in your presentation, you spoke about the human library. I found that so fascinating. I think it's just fabulous that you're able to bring in actual humans who can tell their stories. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you choose the people who are part of the library?
Yeah, really randomly. There's no, sometimes we'll get local dignitaries or, celebrities. We have a couple of celebrities locally that our children know about, or kind of business leaders, but mostly they're just normal people from the community. And quite often it's the adults that need a little bit of reassurance and say, we have nothing to talk about. And we say, everybody has a story. Everybody has a story. And we're not interested in, kind of like world changing, world beating. So we're just interested in the stories of really ordinary people. And actually the stories of really ordinary people are often quite extraordinary. And so our children will start with, we talk about, we talk to our children, we train them and coach them in this. And so they'll say, what's your favorite food? And there's a story. Or tell me about your first day at school, and there's a story. Or who was your first boyfriend, if they're feeling brave, and there's a story. So and that's, I think, what the adults that come really discover about themselves, that they're kind of a whole library of stories within themselves, and that's really, really lovely. And it becomes reciprocal. So they'll say, what's your favorite food? And, we've had people who are refugees who will talk about foods that are their favorite because they remind them of their homelands. And when they eat it here, it's kind of a connection to at home. And, and then they'll say, well, what's your favorite food? So our children will share their stories. And often food reminds us of a person, doesn't it? Or a place or a time or an event, because food's so central, isn't it, to everything we do. So we quite often will start with that, but we'll start with those common experiences that most people have had, really, and go from there. And everybody has the story inside them.
Absolutely, yes. Having done this kind of conscious planning to bring awareness of the SDGs or about being better citizen, have you seen a change? Has there been change in the community that you're part of?
Absolutely. And it's really interesting, Preeti. I'm taking on a new school on Monday, actually, in as well as my current school, Barrowford. And it's striking to me the difference. I think our children are so open to conversations with anybody. They're really curious, they're really respectful, and they're really interested in talking about difference, and they don't shy away from that. But they welcome you, kind of the diversity and the difference, and it adds to our community so much. And a real impact is on our children's oracy skills. The way our children can speak and do present themselves is far better than I have. But today, they're so articulate and they're so passionate about the things that we learned about. So, and if we're sending children at the age of 11 out into the world, able to have a conversation, able to talk about things that are interesting, able to discuss difference in a really respectful way and manage conflict in a really respectful way, I'm all right with that as an outcome.
Brilliant. I think that's exactly what we need to look at as outcomes, and not really the grades or the scores,
Yeah.
irrespective of how good they are. I think I'm seeing a lot of parallels between what's happening at your school as well as what's happening at Tapas. So I'm really excited to see that tomorrow I will also be able to tell the same stories as you and say that this is the kind of impact we've had on the community here. So I love that.
It's a
Thank you so
meeting of souls, wasn't it, in Bangalore?
And very soon, I would love to have you. The next time you're in India, you will definitely have to visit Tapas and make
100%.
sure that, yeah, and we'd love to learn from you about what you're doing there. So I think that kind of brings us to the end of our conversation. Any last thoughts? One request I would like to place is if there could be recommendations of books that can promote diversity and thinking about diversity in children. If you have any recommendation of books, our viewers have shared their email IDs. We could share the mail with them later on with your recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, the cultural capital curriculum has all of the books for this year that I'm using. So there's 39 on there for, just as a starting point. There's quite a few, but yeah, I'm always happy to share books. In fact, I've just ordered a whole new lot. So yeah, there's so many. So if you follow my Twitter handle or our school Facebook page, you'll see lots on there as well.
Great. So we will share with the viewers the Twitter handle and your Facebook
Yeah.
page that you mentioned. So we will share that with our viewers so they can go back and check out all of these. So,
Yeah.
Rachel, this has been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking about your school and the impact that you've made. So this has been beautiful.
Thank you. Oh, it's so lovely to be invited. So and I'm drinking out of my special Bangalore mug as well. So, Bangalore.
Lovely. Great then.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll be in touch. Have a good
Yeah.
evening. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
So that was Rachel Tomlinson talking about her experience being a senior teacher, promoting diversity through the cultural capital curriculum. Going forward, we are going to have another speaker who joining all the way across the world. We went from UK, now we're going to Dubai, where Raya is going to be joining us. So we will take a 1 minute break for you to 1.5 minute break for any of the viewers to just quickly grab a drink of water, answer nature's call, maybe, I don't know, and come back very quickly. So we'll see you on the other side.
I'm here at the Tapas Sports Day. It's all been done with a lot of care and thought for the age of the child.
We're not just learning things in the classroom, we're going on a field trip and looking at things and observing things with our own eyes.
Tapas is that the students are so independent.
I had a dream for my son. With Tapas, I feel that this dream came true. All kids are enjoying each and every small little activities. This Sports Day cum Harvest Festival has been a great celebration for us.
Welcome back. That was a very quick video about our sports day. It gives me great pleasure now to ask another Tapas learner, Sahasra, to join us on the stream to give Raya's introduction. Sahasra, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Hi, ma'am.
Hi, go ahead.
Raya Bidshahri. Raya Bidshahri is a serial entrepreneur and an award-winning educator. Raya is the founder and the chief executive officer of the School of Humanity, an award-winning online high school with an innovative learning model and interdisciplinary curriculum. Raya has been featured by the BBC as one of the 100 most influential and inspiring women globally. She was the main award winner for the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Award. Raya works with the governments and education providers to ideate and execute revolutionary education models for the 21st century world. She sits on the advisory board of multiple ed tech companies. Her mission is to reinvent global education systems in order to better serve humanity. She has spoken at more than 40 conferences in 10 countries, including G20/Y20 Summit, Global Education Forum, UNESCO Expo Sciences, GESS Leaders, HR Tech Summit, and much more. She has been sharing her expertise as a keynote speaker for over a decade since the age of 16 and brings as much needed youth perspective to discussions about the future of education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sahasra. That was really nice of you to introduce Raya. And with that, Raya, a very warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Priti, and thank you, Samasra, for that wonderful introduction. Appreciate it.
Happy to have you, and over to you, Raya.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. As was mentioned in the introduction, I'm Raya. I'm the founder and CEO of School of Humanity. We're an award-winning online high school where learners learn by doing and having a positive impact on the world. So our mission with Tapas really resonates. I thought that, since we have about 20, 30 minutes together, I thought what better way to spend it than actually try to tackle some of humanity's grandest challenges. So over the next few minutes, I invite you on a journey of analyzing and tackling some of the world's most pressing issues in our society. So the first challenge I thought we could start by tackling is something that is on all of our minds, especially given some of the conflicts that we're seeing, regional conflicts we're seeing in the world today. So imagine that you were tasked with creating a plan for our world to accomplish world peace. Imagine you were organizing a team of humans whose goal was to tackle and maintain global peace. My question to you is, what kinds of skills, knowledge, mindsets would you need to make this a reality? What kind of professions or disciplines would you need in order to create a world where we had global peace? I encourage you to think about and reflect on that for a moment. And chances are that as you reflect on the kinds of professions and skills that are required, you'll realize very quickly that we cannot take a siloed approach to this challenge, but rather it's going to take a collection of different disciplines and a kind of interdisciplinary perspective to maintain global peace. So, for example, we would need the psychologists to help us understand how we can overcome ego. We would need the artists to help us build empathy between different groups of individuals through the arts. We would need the politicians to help us understand how political systems contribute to conflict or world peace. We would need the historians to help us understand what the mistakes that we've made in history were and learn from those mistakes. Just a few examples to show you that it takes an interdisciplinary perspective to make this vision a reality. Let's look at a more futuristic challenge. Imagine that you were tasked with designing space habitats on the moon or on Mars or elsewhere outside of Earth in our solar system. Once again, I encourage you to think about and reflect on what are some of the dispositions, the knowledge, the skills that you would need in order to make this vision a reality. What kind of professions would you need to recruit in order to create a team that could design space habitats? Once again, upon reflection, we can see that it takes an interdisciplinary approach to tackle this challenge. So of course, we would need the astrophysicists and astronomers to help us understand where in the solar system we could establish these habitats and how we could get there. But we would also need the ethicists to help us understand whether it's morally right to occupy a planet. We may need the politicians once again to help us understand how we would manage this habitat, the economists to help us build a new economic system in this space habitat, the biotechnologists and the chemists to help us build materials that would last in space, that would allow us to build and survive in space. And I could go on and on. Now, I chose these specific challenges because this is exactly our curriculum at School of Humanity. So I mentioned earlier, we are an award-winning American online high school. We serve learners from over 20 countries across 5 continents. And at our school, our learners learn not through traditional courses, but by embarking upon such interdisciplinary challenges. Every term, they choose one of these challenges. The first half of the challenge is educator-led as we take them through an interdisciplinary analysis and learning of this challenge. And the second half becomes learner-led as learners then begin to identify sub-challenges, investigate them, and tackle those challenges. And because of the interdisciplinary requirement of tackling these challenges, our curriculum is naturally interdisciplinary, right? This is because no single discipline alone can help us tackle climate change or the refugee crisis or even maintaining global peace, but rather a collection of these disciplines can allow us to do so. Now, even though we take this interdisciplinary approach, we still do map these disciplines to different standards or learning outcomes. But what we did is our team basically designed our own unique curriculum called the Human Literacies Framework. This is a collection of knowledge, skills, and mindsets that we believe that learners need in order to flourish in life, in order to contribute meaningfully to society, and in order to be prepared for the emerging workforce. They include domains such as flourishing, discovery, society, thought, action, technology, quantitative skills, and much more. And learners develop these outcomes, these literacies, in a completely interdisciplinary way. So for example, we've seen learners learn geometry through design, improve their emotional intelligence through art, and learn economics by creating a society on Mars. Now, I want to take a moment to share my own personal connection with this approach. So I actually did not come with a degree in education. I did my undergraduate degree in neuroscience at Boston University. And I was on this track where I thought I wanted to become a scientist and a researcher. And this was until, like many young minds, I worked in a lab and I realized what working in a space is like compared to actually studying about it through the textbook. And it's the power of the real world experience. But while I enjoyed the biological kind of basis of the brain and like many traditional neuroscience programs, my program was based very heavily on the science and the biology and the neuroanatomy, I was also craving for a more interdisciplinary study of the brain. I was fascinated by neuroethics, looking at the ethical implications of what we're learning about the brain and how that applies to, for example, our legal system and free will. I was fascinated by neurophilosophy, which delves into the neuroscience of the self and consciousness. I was also really interested in cognitive neuroscience, the science of how we think and how we process different ideas. And last but not least, I've come to appreciate this interdisciplinary field of neuroeducation, which allows us to take findings from the brain to better inform how we teach and how we learn. So this was a craving that I had as a learner myself. And I guess the point I'm taking here is that it's not just about solving real world issues. It takes an interdisciplinary perspective to intellectually understand our world, right? In order to make sense of our minds, of the earth, of the solar system, and the nature of life, it takes an interdisciplinary perspective to be able to do so. Now, earlier last year, we had this amazing film get released, Oppenheimer. Now, comment in the comments if you've watched Oppenheimer, the film. Love to hear from you. And if you did watch the film, you probably saw something that I really appreciated about the film, which is that it was a really interdisciplinary film. So Oppenheimer goes into politics. You learn about the political issues at the time. It goes into history by going over kind of historical events. You also learn about human nature and psychology by seeing the cognitive dissonance that Oppenheimer felt. It goes into nuclear physics and chemistry by looking into the Manhattan Project. And last but not least, it's a work of art. So you see the filmmakers utilize visuals and music in order to exemplify different emotions and events. So Oppenheimer is an excellent exemplification of how to understand our world. We have to take an interdisciplinary perspective to make sense of it. And it's just a great example of that. And this is just another example from our curriculum. In addition to the challenges, we also do these project-based skill units with our learners. And here, just one of our favorite ones is called Designing with Nature, which is an interdisciplinary biology unit where we look at biomimicry. So we look at what can we learn from nature's functions and nature's patterns, and then how can we emulate nature's innovations in human inventions. It touches on geometry by looking at how nature uses shape to accomplish its goals. We look at biological systems, and of course, there's the entrepreneurial connection as well. So just an example of how you can teach even science in a very interdisciplinary way. So as you can imagine, the benefits of this are profound. Our traditional schooling system has been designed to kind of box knowledge into these subjects. This silos our thinking from a very young age and often can contribute into this tunnel vision. And it often ends up, even in the workforce, when you have the silos, it ends up with reinvention of the wheel, with reinventing ideas and missed opportunities for innovation. In contrast, when we have interdisciplinary thinking, it really contributes to new solutions, innovations, and broader understandings. And often innovations from one discipline can be applied to another discipline. An example of this kind of siloed thinking that we see often is a software engineer that designs a user interface based solely on functionality without considering the kind of psychology of the user experience and the product. So that's like a really common example. Another example might be the economists who analyze the decline of a local industry based on market dynamics, but they ignore the social cultural factors that contribute to those changes, right? So again, we see in the workforce, in research, in life, that this kind of silo thinking can really lead to a tunnel vision. Now, one of the key terms I would love to introduce to you all, to introduce to your learners, is this concept of a polymath. So a polymath is like a true interdisciplinary thinker. It's a talented human being that is amazing at more than one thing. So famous polymaths throughout human history include people like Leonardo da Vinci, who we have here on the left. Many of us know him as the artist who created Mona Lisa and The Last Supper. But he was also a pioneer in the sciences and in botany and hydraulics. He was an engineer that designed many innovative machines and, in fact, predicted many of the inventions that would come after his time. He was a writer. He wrote 13,000 pages of diagrams, sketches, writings detailing his different explorations. and really a true visionary. On the right, you have another polymath who's Ada Lovelace. Ada is known as a famous mathematician. She was recognized as one of the first programmers. She wrote one of the first machine algorithms. She was also a passionate musician, and she saw the potential of algorithms to generate musical composition, which bridged the gap between creativity and computation. So very early on, Ada Lovelace understood this interdisciplinary connection between music and mathematics, which also allowed her to be a visionary. She predicted that machines could manipulate symbols and data, foreseeing this future of computers. Now, polymaths like Leonardo da Vinci and Ada Lovelace aren't just humans of the past, they exist in today's world as well. I wanted to take a moment to introduce you to two modern-day polymaths who are good friends of mine. On the left, you have Dr. Merritt Moore, who's a quantum physicist at Oxford, trained at Oxford. She's also a professional ballerina, and she brings together this dance and quantum physics and computers together through her dance with robots choreography. On the right, you have Chef Kouv, who is one of the founders of the first supper clubs in Dubai and has become a really renowned chef in the region. He actually was trained as an architect and came from that background and that passion into cooking. So just to share, we often expect young minds to specialize. We set up an education system that asks them to kind of narrow down, and we have this perception that true success comes from this narrowing down and specializing. But actually, the most successful human beings are interdisciplinary thinkers. They're polymaths. So School of Humanity isn't the only education model out there for the polymaths of our world. We're part of a movement of schools and universities that are starting to really take this approach. So for example, Zayed University has a College of Interdisciplinary Studies with degree programs that are completely interdisciplinary by nature. In the London Interdisciplinary School, which is an accredited university in London, UK, the learners don't choose majors, they choose problems in the world that they want to solve, and they do so in an interdisciplinary way. You have the Green School and Think Global School in Bali, which also have project-based interdisciplinary components to the curriculum. So this is really becoming a movement in the education system. One of the things I would love to flag to educators that are watching this, because chances are you've done something on the spectrum of interdisciplinary teaching before, is that traditional subject-based kind of schedules and curriculum is designed to be intradisciplinary. It's that siloed approach. You can have a multidisciplinary perspective. This is when multiple disciplines work on a problem independently and combine their findings. You then have cross-disciplinary perspectives where you apply theories from one discipline into another. Interdisciplinary is what we've talked about. It's when different disciplines kind of merge and collaborate together to solve a problem, blending different methodologies. But there's a level beyond that, which is transdisciplinary. It basically involves an approach where you allow this boundary of disciplines to completely disappear, and you lead to completely new perspectives as a result. So I just wanted to wrap up with a few strategies to introduce interdisciplinary education as a school. So one of the first things you need to do is go back to your standards, to your learning outcomes at a school-wide level, and make sure that you're developing transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary outcomes that go beyond the subjects. Secondly, it's really helpful to recruit educators who have an interdisciplinary perspective because they're able to develop interdisciplinary curriculum. Third, even if you can't change the core curriculum, consider introducing an interdisciplinary capstone project for your learners. Last but not least, we really recommend training your educators to develop something called T-shaped expertise. So T-shaped expertise is this idea that it characterizes an individual that has this expertise where the horizontal side of the T represents the breadth of their knowledge, and the vertical kind of part of the T represents a couple of areas that they've really gone deep into. So just as we need to ensure our young minds are developing this T-shaped expertise for the future of work, we also need to ensure our educators are developing T-shaped expertise as well. So one of the final things I wanted to share with you was one of my favorite examples of an interdisciplinary project. So what you're seeing here on the screen is the work of an artist called Rafik Anadol. And as you can see from the screen, he is essentially a medium artist. He's a pioneer in something called aesthetics of artificial intelligence, or aesthetics of machine learning. And what he does is he takes these large data sets and he turns them using algorithms into these abstract, dreamlike environments. He's coined terms such as AI data dream or data paintings. And Anadol's art basically explores this intersection of technology and creativity. And as you can see, it's just such a powerful way to explore the ethical implications of artificial intelligence and the societal implications of it. And it's just a beautiful interdisciplinary work of art that brings in the STEM component as well. And I'm choosing to end on this note because we often, we hear a lot about artificial intelligence in today's world and what we can do to prepare learners for a world of AI, to prepare them to become responsible users and creators with AI. And this interdisciplinary perspective is absolutely crucial, because really what we need is AI engineers and AI programmers who also can bring in the morality and ethics from an interdisciplinary perspective, right? We need them to be able to merge psychology and understanding of human nature and learning from history as we pioneer these incredible inventions for the future. So really, I wanted to stop here to make sure we've also left enough time for questions. If any of this resonated with you, please don't hesitate to follow School of Humanity on social media. You can follow our journey, our progress, and our insights. If you'd like to explore partnership opportunities, you can also reach out to me directly, and my email is on the screen. I'd love to move now into questions if we have any.
That was lovely, Raya. Thank you so much for sharing your insights about interdisciplinary learning and how you learn at School of Humanity. It reminded me of a story that I've heard, this narrative about the origin of zero, which one of the narratives says that zero originated in India. The It's truly transdisciplinary because the first origin was found in yoga, in the practice of yoga, where during meditation, the concept of shunya, which is to focus on nothing, is where zero originated or shunya originated. Then it moved to pauses in music that Pingala introduced. And from music, it went into astronomy, where the nothingness of the sky that people observed, that's where it went to. And from there, it moved into math. So really a story of transdisciplinary learning, where zero went from yoga to where it has the place in math today.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And when I learn about things like this, I think about how amazing it would have been to learn this as a child in the education system, right? Like, we just think of zero as zero, but imagine if you had a lesson that was interdisciplinary by nature that touched on all of these things, like where you actually did yoga and experienced zero, or then you moved into science of it. But yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Another example that I could think of while you were speaking was the Medici effect. I think you've heard of the Medici family, who harbored a lot of the artists who were artists, they were thinkers, they were scientists, etc., which I think kind of gave the impetus for the French Revolution, and it gave that whole movement a lot of life, and then brought in the Renaissance after that. So they say that the Medici family was responsible because they harbored so many kinds of thinkers and people, and that's how the Renaissance happened. So I think there are great examples in history to talk about transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary learning. So I'm really glad that you were able to highlight that. So Raya, my question is, so the School of Humanity caters to the secondary grade levels, that is from 9th to 12th grades, right? And this is something that is globally having students, and from across the globe, students are joining your school. So how do you manage to provide a platform where they're able to interact and make sure that the social emotional learning also continues to happen?
Yeah, so the way that our schedules and learning experience is set up is that about half of the learning is completely synchronous in live online workshops. and the other half is self-paced and flexible. And for the half that is synchronous and in live workshops, as the name suggests, we never lecture during these sessions, even if they're online. We do tons of games, activities, discussions, mind mapping. They're really, really interactive sessions. And what this has resulted to is global friendships forming, a global community forming, learners even collaborating with one another on different projects. So we really see that interaction happening online, and it can form a really meaningful social community. Now, we don't believe that, or nor do we advocate that online learning or online socialization should completely replace in-person socialization. That's still very crucial, which is why we really encourage every family that joins us ensure that they have some kind of a social plan, whether it's doing sports in person, whether it's joining homeschooling communities or other communities, so that there is that aspect to it. And last thing I'll share here is we've started to partner with learning hubs and learning centers around the world to offer a hybrid experience to our families. So in Bristol and now in Dubai as well, we have kind of hubs that we've collaborated with, where learners will go to the hubs for co-learning or for social excursions and experiences in person while being enrolled in our online high school. And it really gives you the best of both worlds.
That's brilliant. I think that's the model going forward, where you get access to both worlds, both virtual and in person. So that's brilliant. So you mentioned that you were an American high school, so you follow the American standards, and students, once they complete their 12th in the School of Humanity, how easy or difficult is it for them to adjust to universities going forward?
Yeah, so we actually created our own set of curriculum standards, and that's the human literacies framework I shared earlier. We do benchmark them, so we've benchmarked them against the European, Australian qualifications frameworks, and we also benchmark our advanced credits against the American AP kind of subject areas. And so, we currently have years 9 and 10. Our 10s are moving into 11, so there is a few years before our first graduates move on to university. But we can already see that there's 4 different pathways that are emerging post-university or School of Humanity. And we want to prepare learners for all 4 of them. So one is, of course, going into traditional universities. In those cases, we do issue a GPA-based transcript. Because we benchmark against the APs, if learners need to take the AP exams, they can. But really, a majority of our learners want to go to progressive universities that follow a similar model like ours. And I showed examples of some of those universities earlier, because we believe that if those learners are thriving in our high school, chances are they'll thrive in a project-based university as well. And then we also have 2 other pathways that we don't think schools focus on enough. That is, learners that want to become entrepreneurs, that might not want to go straight to university. They might want to start their own venture or do a gap year. And the 4th is actually going straight into the workforce. There are career trajectories where you can do nano degrees, you can do certification programs, and actually work for a few years before going to university or in parallel to university. So we see it as important to prepare learners for all these pathways, not just traditional university pathways.
It's fabulous to see how the education sector is changing, and I think in India, we are at that threshold of change with the national education policy now giving us these different paths, like what you mentioned. I think we are also getting exposed to this in India, so it's great to see that it's working elsewhere in the world. So it must work for us as well. So this has been wonderful. Any last thoughts that you would like to share about where you think education is heading to? And then we'll wind up.
Yeah, I guess the final thought is, I don't believe in a one-size-fit-all model. And School of Humanity is right. It's the perfect school for some learners, and it might not be for others. And similarly, with all the other examples I shared, there's lots of different innovative approaches emerging. And what I hope is that we end up with an education system that has true variety, in that there's problem-based schools, place-based schools, nature-based schools, school challenge-based schools like ours, so that every human, every learner can find the option that is truly fit for them.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that is the hope for the world. And with that, I think we come to the end of the session. Thank you for sharing your email ID. If there are questions that come up post the session, we will share those with you and hope that you're able to answer those. It has been a pleasure having you, Raya, and we look forward to many more great conversations with you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that brings us to the end of day 2 of Tapas Project Shaala, which is our way of bringing fantastic speakers from across the world to all of you. I hope there have been some great takeaways from today's session. Stay tuned for tomorrow, where we have great examples of project-based learning, alternative learning from India, as well as we have one speaker talking about the choice of boards that exist in India and how to make those choices if you want to pursue alternative learning or project based learning right here in our city, in our country. So I will see you tomorrow evening. Until then, have a great day. Take care. Bye bye.